Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about foam rolling basics. There's a lot you need to know in here and we can get super nitty gritty, but today we're only taking a little surface scratch. We'll dig into some basics that you need to know when getting started with foam rolling. So first we got to talk about some rules. The first rule is we're not going to roll on any joints. We're not going to roll on any bones. The joints, shoulder, elbow, hip, knee, wrist, ankle. The hip is the only one that there's kind of a little bit of an exception to. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You do not want to roll on the main joints of the body. That's going to hurt you. The hip, the only one that's the exception because it's a little meatier. There's a little more muscle around it, but primarily you're only rolling on muscles when you are foam rolling and releasing through this type of release. You don't want to get too carried away with those bones either. Sometimes when you roll around your scapula in your back, you do roll onto that bone a little bit, that shoulder girdle muscle or the shoulder girdle bone right there. You don't want to focus all of your time on that bone specifically, but a little bit of overlap is okay, but try to stay off it as much as possible. Again, your goal here is to roll the muscles, not the bones. That's not what we're after. Your spine, please stay off it. You do not want to take a trigger point ball or a tennis ball or something like that, lacrosse ball, and just roll your spine. That's where bad things happen big time. Third rule here, got to remember to keep breathing. It's not going to always feel super fun, but you need to keep breathing through all of these therapies, and you'll see it's not going to be super long, and if it is, you're going to be kind of hitting other areas, but keep breathing. And the last rule is you're going to maintain that posture. For instance, let's say you're rolling your quad, you're in that plank position. What is your upper back doing? Is it rolled? If so, you need to come back out into more of a plank position because you're going to open yourself up to some more injuries and you're going to set yourself up for those negative movement patterns later on. Again, we're always going to be in that proper movement, that proper posture when we are going through this movement. You don't want to be hunched over. You don't want to be crunched and just closing yourself off in a lot of situations because that, again, it's gonna mess up how you're moving and what your body's going to do in certain situations when you're not rolling or releasing these muscles. So those are the 4 main rules for foam rolling. Essentially what you need to get started, if you just want to do this foam roller here, that is perfectly okay. Moving it up a step, I have a trigger point ball right here. You can also go to your local school or whatever's around you and get a lax ball. A lot of times the teams, they go out there and they just don't clean up after themselves. Use your community around you all the time. I'm at a park, I find golf balls, tennis balls, lacrosse balls. Doesn't even have to be at a school. And this is just the basic set of what you really need. Just starting out that foam roller, stepping it up, get a hard circular object. A lot of times softballs work really well, and again, you don't always have to go out and buy it if you just hunt around on some of the fields that are around you. So just setting up for the basics, these 2 things, I would highly recommend getting a trigger point ball just for those pesky areas that the foam roller can't really get into very, very well. So these are the only 2 things you need to get started. The major areas or focus points, typically what people do is you'll go to the gym, you'll see someone foam rolling on their quads in a little plank position. They might do some glute, and typically what you're going to see is them rolling back and forth with the foam roller on their back, perpendicular to their spine. And that's pretty much all you're going to see in the gym. And what we need to do is we need to change some of that mentality, and what we are going to do is the complete athlete focus over here. Now I have a lot of things listed out, but it's important. You're not going to be going down this whole list every single time in here. You're ideally going to pick 3 to 5 areas that you are struggling big time in. For instance, if you go down into your, let's say you do a step back lunge and you notice that you're not really getting any extension, or when you're running, you're not getting any extension, well, we probably need to open up those hips a little bit. You probably have some tight quads. So a quad is going to be one of your areas. If you find that you're walking in a straight line or you're running and you notice your toes are always pointed out when you land and hit the floor, then your calves are going to be another area that we're going to focus on big time. If you go down for a deadlift and we see your back hunching over and your legs are really bent, you probably have some tight hamstrings in there. So we're going to focus on those areas. This is where you need to listen to your body for sure. The chest, I put that one number top, or at the top level right there, just because no one really focuses on it. And what we're doing for most of us, almost all of us, every single day is we're sitting at a computer, we're sitting at a desk, and we're actively closing off our chest. So you need to be foam rolling your chest. That is probably always going to be on your list of things to do, just to open yourself up. Especially our triathletes, they're in that time trial position. They're by nature closed up. And so we need to counteract that in the off times right there. And these other areas, we will focus on all of these at some point, but depending on who you are and what your imbalances are, that's what we're going to focus on right here. We're going to move away from this typical three model over here, and we're going to go into the whole athlete approach right here, especially the foot too. So what to do and when. I got 3 different situations for you, and this is going to apply to most scenarios for you. Before a lifting session, before a cardio session, and just for recovery, watching TV at nighttime. So let's say I'm getting ready to do a little lifting session here. I am going to focus on, again, 4 to 6 areas that are highly important to me. If I know that my quads are super tight from that long bike ride I did the other day, and I got a quad dominated exercise in the weight room that day, I know, okay, I'm going to need to just release these really quick. I'm going to have to foam roll that area for sure, just to kind of get the blood flowing, clearing some of that area of waste and things like that. And again, this is going to be quick. It's only going to be 20 to 30 seconds here. You can extend it a little bit, but you don't really want to go beyond that 45 seconds or a minute in that one specific area. That's because if you're spending, let's say you got 6 locations, that's 6 minutes right there. And a lot of you guys don't have a whole lot of time, so that's why we kind of shrunk it down for you. We are focusing on your areas of super high importance for you. If you know you're super closed off that we just talked about, your chest going to be one, especially if we're doing some of the back exercises, rows, flies, things like that. You're going to need to open up that chest to allow those muscles to fire and contract. You're going to focus on what's tight, you're going to increase that blood flow, and you're going to increase the muscle resting length in that muscle. And the whole idea is to trigger the sympathetic nervous system for here. It's the same thing again for before a cardio workout, super similar. Again, you're not going to get super deep into these muscles. You're not going to sit on them for 2-3 minutes in a row. This is going to be a little lighter on the foam roller. It's going to be a little bit faster, not super stationary, and you're just going to open things up. And then the last area we need to talk about is for recovery. This is where you got 5, 8, 15 locations, if you have enough time, that you're going to be focused on, you're going to be hitting. You're going to spend a little bit longer time here. It's about double here on the time, so a minute and a half per location. And it's okay to take your time here, for sure. You don't have anything rushing you. You're not getting ready for a session. And so the way that you're going to foam roll is going to be a little different than the other two in this recovery area, but we'll talk about that in a couple seconds. I don't want to rush things. The goal is to restore that muscle length. So envision you just did a super long run that day. You're going to need to flush out some of that waste. You're going to need to kind of bring that muscle back to normal length, because if you don't, it's not as simple as this, but the muscles will shrink over time. Imagine if you ran super long every day, they'd shrink, and then you ask it to do something like go out for that long run, or you have to make a quick adjustment on your long run and react to a deer or something running out in front of you. Because that muscle's been shortened and it hasn't been released, that's when potential injuries can happen. So a lot of times athletes will go out, they will ignore the rolling, stretching sessions, and they'll have to make a minor correction, or they'll have to tense up on the bike, or something will happen in the open water where they'll turn around and make sure there's not an animal behind them or something like that. And almost always these lead to most of the injuries that happen, and they're almost always preventable just from this right here. There are imbalance injuries for sure, but the bulk of injuries can be prevented from this easy, simple thing right here. Restore that muscle length. This is imagine the Normatec legs flushing out all that waste. They feel so great. Your legs feel like $1,000,000 because you just got a great massage on your legs. Yeah, of course it's awesome. Of course it feels good. And if you haven't been doing that the whole season, you show up on race week, sit in the Normatec legs, your legs feel great, they're awesome. And then you go out and race, and a lot of times that can lead to injuries as well. You just had a major leg release, and then you're going to ask your legs and body to perform at a super peak level. It's not going to happen normally. And if it does, you're opening yourself up to a lot of injuries. So just make sure you stay consistent with all of this and hit your specific areas, target what you specifically need to target. Everyone's going to be a little different. So these different methods that we're talking about. The first one is quick and light. Imagine you're on a foam roller and you see that guy doing the quad foam rolling. He's going up and down it, not super fast, but he's not really pausing anywhere, and there's no real deep tissue, like I'm digging in there in that muscle group. We're just opening that muscles up. You're primarily getting the muscle ready for movement. If you have a bugaboo area, yeah, for sure, you need to get on that and you need to kind of address that a little bit differently. But if everything's firing and you're not really finding a whole lot of tight spots or major painful spots on these foam rollers, then you don't need to spend excessive time there. You just want to get things ready to go. You're going to get more ready through the dynamic warm-up and things like that. But the main goal is, again, if we go back here, we're just getting the blood flow going. We're increasing that muscle resting length, triggering that sympathetic nervous system, all of that. It's typically not used for recovery unless it's race week. Again, if you're at race week and you're doing some deep tissue massage work, you're setting yourself up for failure. You just want to get the muscles to relax a little bit. You don't want to totally relax them because it takes a couple of sessions and a couple of days to kind of wake them back up. Deep tissue massage 2-3 weeks before that race, not race week. Next category or different method that I wrote is a stationary. Imagine you see someone. Let's do a calf example. So you see someone at the gym, they're rolling out their calves and they found a spot and it hurts and they got the pain face on, and you see them pausing on that spot and just sitting there. That is a stationary one. That's more deep tissue area. It's used to release the pesky muscle areas. So you'll know if you've ever rolled on top of it, everything will feel great, and then all of a sudden it's not. Whoa, oh my gosh, this one area feels terrible. It feels so bad. And you need to oftentimes these quick and light method will not solve that problem. You need to do more of a deep tissue or a stationary approach for that muscle to release it. Again, before a session, not always ideal, but if it's a really bad area, you don't have a choice. You're going to have to do that in order to release it a little bit. Again, right here I said occasionally you can do this before a weight session or a moving session, cardio session, but you shouldn't do it consistently. And if you are having to do it consistently, then we need to take a step back and we need to incorporate some more recovery foam rolling sessions into your life or your time availability. Because when we don't release that muscle, then again, just as we talked about before, bad things will happen because that muscle, imagine it's a piece of paper, right? And as the muscle gets tighter and tighter, that piece of paper, the ends of that paper get closer and closer and closer. And then you're asking that muscle to contract and release and contract and release, but it can only release so far because of that kink in the middle of the paper. It's crumpled up in the middle, causing the ends to get a little closer to each other. And if you keep doing that, there's going to be a tipping point, and it's not going to be a fun one, and you're going to have to take time off and recover and do PT. And so again, this is something that's super simple. Just make sure you're hitting your areas. Make sure you do not skip this and you don't turn around and the whole season's gone by and you haven't foam rolled. That's the last thing that I want. Last method for the foam rolling is called a tack and floss, and it kind of combines the first two methods. So what you're going to do is find a bugaboo area. Imagine that that person's on their calf, rolling their calf. They've found a terrible area and they need to go stationary on it because it just will not release. So they're going to go stationary on it, and while they're stationary on that spot, what they're going to do is move the joint below it. So in this case, they're going to move their ankle. They're going to point their toe away from them and then point it up to the sky. Point it away, point it up to the sky. And what you're doing, let's go back to that piece of paper, on that middle section of the paper that's where your foam roller is sitting, right on that crumpled part of that paper. And what you're doing is you're taking one side of the paper and you are stretching it out and letting it come back in, stretching it out and letting it come back in. And you're doing that 3 or 4 times and then finding a new spot. And what that's going to do is you're essentially starving the blood flow of that muscle tightness, that muscle knot, right? And you are releasing that area and actively tacking and flossing the muscle back and forth. So when you get off that spot of the foam roller, when you move away to a different spot, what that's going to do is that's going to reintroduce some of that blood flow back into that spot, and it's going to allow it to release a little bit. It's not going to totally release. You need many sessions to make that happen. But it will release a little bit, or it typically does release a little bit after 3 or 4 and then moving on to a new spot. And again, you can tack and floss differently. It doesn't always have to be up and down. You can do a circle with that ankle. You can go left, right. Just figure out what works for you best. And I say that with a kind of a little grain of salt because this is probably one of the more painful ones. It's not going to feel great if you're doing it correctly. If there's pain, you definitely need to stop. But if it's just uncomfortable, then you know you're doing it right. But if there's pain, get off of it, find a new spot, and figure out what's going on if you can't roll without pain. If that's the case, you need to refer out, go to a doctor. But that tack and floss is primarily used to gain more range of motion in that joint, right? Because if your muscles are super tight, they're preventing that joint from moving the way it should. You could use this in the middle of a session. So imagine let's say you're on the bike, right? And your quads are just killing you. No matter what you do, like it doesn't work. Number one, we have a glute activation problem for sure. If that's the case, if you're doing an indoor stationary ride and it's only an hour, and your quads can't handle that, and you don't feel anything in your glute, you have a glute imbalance. You have a glute activation issue, for sure. But what you can do in the interim in that session is you can do a little tacking and flossing on your foam roller on your quad, because if it's that bad and it's forcing you to stop, then something is definitely wrong, and you need to foam roll that quad to release it a little bit. That's not the best thing to do in this situation, but in order to get you through the workout, that's what needs to happen. After the workout, you have to do some imbalance evaluations. So before the workout next time, maybe what we do is some monster band stuff. Maybe we do some clamshells. Maybe we do some glute activation with our mini band, things like that. And that is because that will activate that glute a little bit more and get it ready before that bike and allow the glute muscles to take over a little bit. It could just be as simple as an overloaded muscle right there. So use these different methods sparingly and when it's specific for you. Okay. Last slide here. Remember some reminders. Muscles, not joints. The primary focus of doing the foam rolling is to release those muscles, is to release those muscular imbalances that you have as best you can in that moment. Pick the method that is right for you and your situation. So we briefly talked about that a little bit at the end, but if this is before a moving session, it's going to be different than if it's a recovery just at night watching TV, you're foam rolling during the commercial breaks. It's going to be very different. Stay consistent with your rolling. Even if you can only do this 2 or 3 times a week, do it 2 or 3 times every week. If you're traveling a ton, this is one of the things that travels best. That's why if we go back to our ball, right? If you get that ball, it travels so easily in a suitcase. There's no excuses. You can get a lax ball. You can bring that through security. You can have all kinds of good stuff. They sell mini handheld rollers now. They look like rolling pins. There's no excuse anymore. And it just doesn't have to be rolling, you know? We can work for a situation that's going to best prepare you and best get those muscles back to your length. If you don't have like a tennis ball or can't find one or a lacrosse ball or a rolling pin, the bare minimum, it doesn't have to be rolling. You can stretch a little bit. You can stretch with your rolling. Say you're gonna release your quads and then you're gonna do a hip stretch afterwards. That would be great. That would be awesome because then you're gonna unlock some stretching ranges of motion that you probably couldn't be able to get without that foam rolling. So combining the two is great. If you have the time to do that, please do it. It is one of the best things you can do to help yourself recover and get back after it the next day, the next day, the next day. So that is a brief overview of the rules and what to do with foam rolling. Hope you guys enjoyed it.